Assignment. I'm David Brinkley, NBC News. Last night, President Nixon based his speech on the assumption that what he called the great silent majority of Americans support the policy he is following now, and so he offered no changes in it. Today, he had several thousand telegrams from people agreeing with him and bitter criticism in Congress from elsewhere from those who do not. Just which is the majority, nobody knows for certain. The public opinion polls show a division of somewhere around 60-40, varying one way or another depending on how the question is phrased and what alternatives are offered. In any case, the president seemed pleased with the telegrams praising his speech, and reporters and cameramen were invited into his office to see the piles of wires on his desk. It was a highly unusual procedure, and in fact, nobody could remember anything like it before. About a month ago, the White House was asked about the mail and telegrams on the Haynesworth nomination to the Supreme Court, and the answer was the White House would not discuss it. Anyway, Mr. Nixon said today about half of those sending wires had picked up his phrase, the great silent majority, and said they were members of it and supported his policy to continue the war, at least until there is some concession from the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong. While he was pleased with the telegrams, he could not have been pleased with his critics in Congress. Even some in his own party said they were disappointed. Senator Fulbright said Mr. Nixon had now very clearly embraced Johnson's war and made it Nixon's war. He said he had planned another investigation of the war, but postponed it until he heard last night's speech. Now he says he will go ahead with it in about 2 weeks. Here were two of the many comments in Congress, Fulbright's and one from Senator Allott, a Colorado Republican.
I don't think it's the kind of war that Mr. Rusk thought it was, or President Johnson thought it was, or now, unfortunately, President Nixon thinks it is.
But given that...
And this is very important, I think. If you accept his assumptions and President Johnson's, there's no justification for winding down the war. You ought to go on and win it, if it really is justified. If it is not justified, as they say it is, by an international conspiracy of nations seeking to take over the world, if it is not, that's not so, then it ought to be liquidated. It ought to be liquidated with a minimum bloodshed and continued destruction. So I think it's a very important speech, because he now truthfully has and fully taken as his own the Johnson War, and I think it's based on a fundamental error.
To me, the president has spelled out the only way that I can see of extracting ourselves from that war. I see a close of the credibility gap which has existed for the last 5 years. For the first time, the President of the United States has come forward to the people of the United States and put the cold, plain facts before them. Not only those things which were favorable, but also those which are unfavorable. I happen to believe, as he does, that if the American people are given the ungarnished truth, that they will face up to the responsibilities and do that which has to be done.
Again, the president wrote his speech by hand on a yellow pad and wrote it in the belief that what he called the silent majority of Americans oppose a quick or precipitous end to the war, support him, and oppose those who want a quick end. Well, here's what he said on that.
And so tonight, to you, the great silent majority of my fellow Americans, I ask for your support. I pledged in my campaign for the presidency to end the war in a way that we could win the peace. I have initiated a plan of action which will enable me to keep that pledge. The more support I can have from the American people, the sooner that pledge can be redeemed. For the more divided we are at home, the less likely the enemy is to negotiate at Paris. Let us be united for peace. Let us also be united against defeat. Because let us understand, North Vietnam cannot defeat or humiliate the United States. Only Americans can do that.
Today we have tried to find, as far as it could be done, a fair sample of the public reaction to in various cities in various parts of the country, concentrating on those areas where the silent majority, if it exists, is most likely to be found. And we asked a number of people what they thought of the speech. And while the result may not be a precisely accurate cross-section of the population, it is nevertheless interesting.
I thought it was wonderful. I go along with him 100%.
I thought it was to the point, and I was a little disappointed that there wasn't anything new brought out, but I guess there wasn't anything new to report.
I don't believe he's doing as much as he should. If I had my way about it, they'd continue the bombing.
According to build-up, I expected that perhaps he would withdraw everybody by Christmas to make a good show and give in to some people, but I give him a lot of credit for doing what I don't think was an easy thing for him.
Well, I agree with the president on what he says, and I was kind of anxious on listening to the president's speech, and as the president stopped, the speech was over with, I told my wife, I says, well, I thought it was was more of a pep talk to the people of the United States.
I thought it was very well done. I think his words, particularly those about the silent majority overwhelming the loud minority, I think is the biggest point that he made.
Well, you have to agree with him because I feel I would agree with him, yes, because he is kind of in a box, more or less.
He said exactly what I said he would say and which I felt he should not say. I believe the war could have been ended by now, should have been ended by now.
Well, as soon as he got in office, he said the war is going to be over in no time, and no time he's repeating the same thing over and over.
President Nixon's speech last night? No, I didn't. Did you read about it? No, I haven't even had a chance to read the paper. I'll get a little later.
We elected him. I think we have to stand behind him, kind of regardless of what his decisions are, and I happen to go along with him.
No, he didn't say nothing. He didn't take any course. He said maybe, maybe, maybe. I still got something, see some secrets, like I said before, we got elected.
He's been pushed by, as usual, the noisy and the demonstrating minority. And I think he's held a pretty firm, stiff course, and I think that in the long run, it's the only way we can go.
I think a president should be a sort of a compromiser, a man who does stand in the middle of the road, because he's got many factions in the country to deal with. You can't just appease one side.
I thought he would cooperate with what I think the majority wants, and they want a quick peace and a quick settlement in Vietnam.
Well, I'm behind the president 100%, but I happened to have breakfast with a fellow this morning, and he has 2 boys in service. And he's anxious to get those boys home. So what answer could I give him?
It is being said in the White House that Mr. Nixon has approached nothing in his presidency with as much concern and anguish as last night's speech on Vietnam. According to men in a position to know, here is the president's reasoning. He knows the country is divided on the war, but believes that most of the people will support a policy of all deliberate speed in withdrawal. He has therefore decided to energize his silent supporters, and last night's speech gave the president a place to stand and fight. Mr. Nixon believes that there is no center ground left in American public opinion, so he has chosen a position closer to the hardliners. No one in Washington doubts that the road ahead will be a rough one. Mr. Nixon now finds himself in a beleaguered position once occupied by Lyndon Johnson, who described it as hunkering up like a jackrabbit in a rainstorm.
The Huntley Brinkley Report is produced by NBC News and brought to you in color by Head & Shoulders Shampoo in a new unbreakable plastic bottle. Only the bottle's been changed to protect the butterfingered.
Hey, Charlie, meet Hal, our new roommate this fall.
Hey, Hal. Dandruff.
Last summer, Hal was quite the romantic hotshot.
Not anymore. Last summer, the girls didn't notice his dandruff.
Now it shows.
Fall is back. So is the dandruff problem.
Control it with Head & Shoulders, the most effective dandruff shampoo you can buy.
Oh, Hal.
I thought you said...
Shut up. Head & Shoulders, for fall, for keeps.
Announcing the newest way to get fast relief from head cold symptoms.
That's new, Alka-Seltzer.
It looks like Alka-Seltzer, but it isn't.
It's club soda.
That's a brand new cold tablet in an effervescent form. Inside this glass is a decongestant, an antihistamine, and aspirin. And that's why no other cold product can give you faster, more effective relief in so many ways.
What do you call it?
We call this new cold tablet Alka-Seltzer Plus.
Oh, are you going to get sued by Alka-Seltzer?
No, it's from the makers of Alka-Seltzer.
Do they know about it?
Yeah.
We call one-a-day vitamins plus iron the two-job pill. As the name says, it does two things for women with a lot on their shoulders, like a whole big family. It gives you all the vitamins you usually need to take, especially if you don't always eat right. And it gives you the extra iron women have to have. Take care of yourself. Take one-a-day vitamins plus iron. After all, where would they be without you?
Needless to say, the organizers of the last moratorium and the planners of the next one, those who see the war as a calamitous blunder that ought to be ended, found the president's speech bitterly disappointing and out of touch with the realities of American opinion. The president addressed some of his remarks to them, referring to them as the minority, a label they probably do not accept. But anyway, here's what he said to them.
In San Francisco, a few weeks ago, I saw demonstrators carrying signs reading, "Lose in Vietnam, bring the boys home." Well, one of the strengths of our free society is that any American has a right to reach that conclusion and to advocate that point of view. But as President of the United States, I would be untrue to my oath of office if I allowed the policy of this nation to be dictated by the minority who hold that point of view and who try to impose it on the nation by mounting demonstrations in the street.
It seems clear from our calling around the country last night that people who were only marginally involved are now deeply committed to the cause of peace. That people who were previously deeply involved are now ready to take even more of their time to spend on working for peace. It seems clear to me that he has reinforced the sentiment in the peace movement, made it much stronger, and made it much more possible for us really to work in the communities. We anticipate that the president's speech will be tragically of help to us. We would obviously rather that he had made some kind of move which would make it harder on us, but he has chosen not to do that.
If a hard-nosed administration attitude will help the peace movement, then it got plenty of help in a government decision reached yesterday. A massive anti-war march with 250,000 to 500,000 people is supposed to come down Pennsylvania Avenue and pass the White House November 15th. But Deputy Attorney General Richard Kleindienst said there is concern about the loose leadership and relatively undisciplined ranks of the marchers, and they will not be issued permits for the march. Administration officials indicated the peace groups could go to court for a permit, which suggested if there is to be a mass march in the capital, the administration would prefer that the courts take the rap for it. The lawyer for the peace groups said, however, they might march with or without a permit, and he said the administration was doing exactly what Mayor Daley did last year in Chicago, which led to confrontation in the streets. Carl Stern, NBC News, Washington.
As preparation for the November 15th moratorium, hundreds of MIT students assembled on the campus and heard speeches denouncing the Vietnam War. They also called for MIT to give up Defense Department research. They were led by the November Action Coalition, a radical anti-war group. They marched across the street into the administration building and headed for the president's office.
On the said Massachusetts Institute of Technology's premises.
It was guarded by police and some of the faculty. A faculty member, Jerome Wiesner, former science advisor to President Kennedy, debated one of the students.
I don't believe in madness, I don't believe in mob rule, and I don't believe in the kind of things you're doing.
But MIT has a chance now to say something to the world, to the public of the United States, that this kind of...
You don't think I've been saying things to the public of the United States?
MIT has not made statements to the effect of the
MIT doesn't make statements. People at MIT make statements. You pick it, you come here and say, am I proud of myself? Do I like myself? That's a hell of a way to start any conversation.
Well, no, I think that...
When you want to talk to me about issues and what I've done and what I haven't done and what we can do, come around and ask me.
Things are more important than issues. Things have to do
Things are more important than issues. What do you mean by that?
Well, the most important
people are more important.
That's right.
There were no arrests. Tomorrow, students say they will try to prevent people from going to work at MIT's instrumentation laboratory, and police say they will be there in force. Dean Braylis, NBC News, Boston.
Did you know Pell-Mell Gold 100s are longer, yet milder, smoother tasting? And United States government figures show Pell-Mell Gold is actually lower in tar than the best-selling Filter King. Yes, it's longer than king-sized. Yet milder, smoother tasting. Pell-Mell Gold. Menthol, too. Longer, yet milder.
If you're a menthol smoker, here's something worth taking a long look at. Pell-Mell Menthol 100s. U.S. government figures show Pell-Mell Menthol lower in tar than the best-selling Menthol King. Longer than king size, yet milder, cooler tasting. Pell-Mell Menthol. Longer,
yet milder.
The Huntley Brinkley Report continues, brought to you by Tums. Now in a choice of 4 flavors as well as good old peppermint. Tums for the tummy.
If you ever suffer from acid indigestion, this little tablet contains one of the most effective medicines ever discovered for it. In tests at a famous college, it proved to neutralize excess acid in a matter of seconds. Prepared for a little shock, it's Tums, now in 5 flavors. It'll make your stomach feel better now.
In the meantime, in the war itself, the one in Vietnam, the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong opened rocket attacks in several places and made ground attacks in others. The fighting was heavier than it has been in weeks. Hanoi and the Viet Cong both, of course, denounced the president's speech using all their usual adjectives. In addition to the majority and minority in this country, the president in last night's speech had a few words for Hanoi.
I want to be sure that there is no misunderstanding on the part of the enemy with regard to our withdrawal program. We have noted the reduced level of infiltration, the reduction of our casualties, and are basing our withdrawal decisions partially on those factors. If the level of infiltration or our casualties increase while we are trying to scale down the fighting, it will be the result of a conscious decision by the enemy. Hanoi could make no greater mistake than to assume that an increase in violence will be to its advantage. If I conclude that increased enemy action jeopardizes our remaining forces in Vietnam, I shall not hesitate to take strong and effective measures to deal with that situation. This is not a threat. This is a statement of policy, which as Commander-in-Chief of our armed forces, I am making in meeting my responsibility for the protection of American fighting men, wherever they may be.
Behind the walls of their headquarters outside of Paris, members of North Vietnam's peace talk delegation listened to President Nixon's speech and have been studying it. They found nothing new in it. That's just what Mr. Nixon wanted. The communists did not expect the president to offer new concessions here at the peace talks, but they did hope that Mr. Nixon would order more American troop withdrawals from South Vietnam. The fact that he did neither means Mr. Nixon is trying to strengthen the American negotiating position here and hopefully force the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese into making their own concessions. But the communist negotiating strategy has been not to compromise and wait for anti-war sentiment in the United States to force the United States out of South Vietnam unilaterally. The North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong know that the key issue is not just what President Nixon says he wants to do, but whether American public opinion will allow him to do it. As a result, the communists will carefully watch American reaction to the president's speech, above all this month's moratorium, before they make their next move. Garrick Utley, NBC News, Choisy-le-Roi.
If President Nixon's constituents were South Vietnamese, he'd have less to worry about. The reaction here has been generally favorable, even enthusiastic. Saigon intellectuals are cynical that he said nothing new, and opposition leaders here, of course, would prefer that all American troops got out right away. But most South Vietnamese are grateful that the president didn't spring any unpleasant surprises, like announcing immediate American withdrawal or a unilateral ceasefire.
President Nixon's speech is, I cannot say guarantee, a formal guarantee for us, but by deduction of what President Nixon has said, we think that the U.S. support for Vietnamese struggle still remains. I see no point to get disappointed. I think that all we could expect from his speech was, I think it's good enough, you know.
What do you think the reaction is here in Saigon?
To me, I think the President Nixon address is very excellent. And I think all the people of Vietnam will be very, very favorable to his speech. And concerning the timetable and which he wants to keep secret, that's very wise.
Mr. Nixon's speech is generally viewed here as a moderate, reasonable effort to open the door to peace without sacrificing South Vietnam's interests. The South Vietnamese are only hoping that American reaction will be half as favorable or half as tolerant. This is Wells Hangen, NBC News, Saigon.
Mr. Nixon said one very important thing in his speech last night, that when he set out to end the war, he realized that negotiations might not provide the way out. So, he said, he had put another plan into effect which would end the war without negotiations. So the new strategy seems to be to keep American casualties at a minimum, to stick with the Saigon government, and to build up the South Vietnamese. Since the enemy won't talk in Paris, these other moves would appear to be about the only way to wind down the war. The trouble is that the enemy will have something to do with American casualties, that the Saigon government has practically no popular base, and that the South Vietnamese may not, in the end, have the will to defend themselves without our help. These are the perils of Mr. Nixon's policy. But in the absence of any hope at the Paris talks, the course the president has chosen involves doing everything we can do on the ground in Vietnam, and that will take time.
You're late. You do.
Mrs. Porter, did you get your dentures Polident clean this morning?
The way I'm rushed?
No, there's a new fast-working Polident tablet, new Polident Green.
Polident Green? Why green?
The green shows speed as powerful green cleaning bubbles clean dentures fast.
Fast? How fast?
In just minutes, the green is gone. That means stain and odor are gone. Now, the best way to clean dentures is the fast way, too. New Polident Green.
If you're a denture wearer and buying foods your whole family can eat, but you can't because they loosen your dentures, you need Polygrip. What does Polygrip do that powder adhesives don't? Say this pencil is your denture. Powders can leave gaps, weak spots. Your dentures can let go, but not with Polygrip. No gaps, no letting go, no embarrassment. Get Polygrip and eat the same foods the rest of your family eats.
The other news, 2 Latin American passenger jets were hijacked to Cuba, one from Brazil and one from Nicaragua. In Washington, the Federal Aviation Administration said it now had at several airports a new device to detect weapons on passengers boarding airplanes and found it effective. After the big debate about ABMs and military hardware last spring, the Pentagon appropriation wound up today in a Senate-House Conference Committee. It turned out the Pentagon got everything it asked and more. Earlier this year, A. Ernest Fitzgerald, an efficiency expert at the Air Force, told Congress about the huge growing costs of the C-5A transport. Today, the Air Force abolished his job. The stock market reaction to the speech was interesting. Brokers said a lot of people were selling this morning out of emotion because they thought the war would be prolonged, and the Dow Jones lost about 8 points. Later in the day, prices rose, and the Dow Jones closed with a loss just over 1 point, and an average share of common stock gained 4 cents. The president's speech was carried by radio to the armed forces everywhere, including those in Vietnam, where they listened with unusual interest.
American withdrawal and become greater. But we started the program.
Were you disappointed by what the president said?
No, I think I expected it.
Why?
I don't know, just expected him to say that.
You think there's no quick way out of this then?
No. Just, like he said, there's only one way out. That's the right way.
Well, with good sense in his speech, I don't feel we should pull out all at once like he said, but stay in and pull out gradually. Everybody wants to go home, but there's a time and place for it.
Give you a morale problem?
It won't be after today, no.
Has it been?
The men have performed. The officers have had to lead more than usual. The men have performed admirably, as usual. But I think that in the back of all our minds has been that there's going to be a ceasefire today, and I think it was wrong that they were led to believe this. And now that it's over, we'll get back to business as usual.
In Vietnam, as in this country, the reaction was divided somewhere close to down the middle. So wherever the majority lies, and however big a majority it may be, all the events and reactions of today suggested this country was more sharply and more angrily divided now than it was yesterday at this time. Good night for NBC News.